There is a moment that almost no one talks about. It usually happens quietly. No sirens, no warning. Just a simple movement that suddenly feels different. You stand up from a chair you have stood up from 10,000 times before. And this time, your legs hesitate, not pain, not injury. Just a delay. A fraction of a second where your body seems to ask a question it never asked before. Are we still strong enough? Most people brush it off. Bad sleep, long day. Getting older, they tell themselves. But here is the part that should stop you cold. That hesitation is not random. It is not harmless. And once it begins, it almost never announces what comes next. Because long before canes, long before walkers, long before hospital rooms, and whispered conversations about being careful, something else is already happening. Deep inside the body, something is quietly shutting down. Leg strength is not just muscle. It is independence. It is balance. It is reaction time. It is the invisible system that keeps you upright when the ground shifts, when you trip, when life moves faster than you expected. And once it starts to fade, everything else follows. The stairs you stop taking, the walks you shorten, the confidence that shrinks without you realizing it. Doctors have a term for this decline. They talk about aging. They talk about biology. They talk about statistics. But what they rarely explain is why it happens so fast. And why it seems almost unavoidable in some parts of the world, while in others, it barely happens at all. Because somewhere on the planet, there are people in their 70s, 80s, even 90s, who stand up effortlessly, who walk without fear, who do not calculate every step. They do not train like athletes. They do not spend hours in gyms. Many of them never did, and yet their legs remain strong. Not strong for their age. Strong, period. This is where the story takes a turn that most health advice never touches. In the West, muscle loss after midlife is treated like gravity. Unavoidable. Inevitable. Something to manage, not prevent. But in one culture, that assumption never existed. Their leg strength was never separated from daily life. It was never outsourced to exercise routines or equipment. It was woven into how people sat, waited, rested, and moved, and the results are not subtle. Epidemiologists noticed it first. Orthopedic surgeons noticed it next. Physical therapists could not ignore it anymore. Elderly adults with fewer falls. Lower rates of hip fractures, shorter recovery times. More years lived without assistance. And when researchers tried to isolate the reason, they expected to find genetics. They did not. They expected to find diet. That was not the answer either. What they found was something far more uncomfortable. The difference was not what these people were doing extra. It was what they never stopped doing. Movements that the modern world quietly erased. Movements that children perform naturally. And adults abandon without realizing what they are giving up. When those movements disappear, the body adapts. Not by staying strong, but by becoming efficient at weakness. Muscles that stabilize the knee go dormant. The ankles lose their micro-adjustments. The hips stop absorbing shock, and the brain, sensing danger, begins to slow everything down. This is why falls rarely come out of nowhere. They are the final chapter of a long, invisible story. A story that often begins decades earlier. What makes this even more unsettling is that the decline does not require illness. It does not require disease. It only requires stillness, long hours sitting, soft furniture, shoes that do all the work for your feet. Convenience replacing necessity. The body responds exactly as it was designed to respond. If you no longer need this, it decides, I will let it go. And it does, quietly, relentlessly. But here is the part that changes everything. That same design works in reverse. When the body is reminded of certain demands, it rebuilds. Not aggressively. Not dramatically. Precisely. The same systems that shut down can be reawakened, even later in life. Even after years of decline. This is not theory. It has been observed, measured, repeated. And yet, most people never hear about it because these movements do not look impressive. They do not sell equipment. They do not fit neatly into workout culture. They look ordinary, almost too ordinary to matter, but they carry something. Modern fitness forgot. They ask the body to support itself, to balance itself, to hold itself. And when that happens consistently, something remarkable begins to return. Not just strength. Trust. Trust between your brain and your legs. Trust that when you stand, you will stand. When you step, you will land. When you move, your body will respond. This trust is the foundation of independence. Lose it, and fear enters every movement. Regain it, and life quietly opens back up. The cultures that preserved these movements never framed them as exercise. They framed them as normal, resting in positions that challenge the legs instead of chairs that erase them. Standing in ways that demand balance instead of leaning away from it. Moving slowly enough to feel every part of the foot instead of rushing. Past sensation. Over decades, those small choices compounded. And now, the data is impossible to ignore. Adults who should statistically be frail are not. People expected to struggle do not. The usual timeline of decline simply does not apply. The question is no longer whether this works. The question is why almost no one else is doing it. And the answer may be harder to accept than any diagnosis, because it means leg strength does not disappear with age. It disappears with neglect. And neglect, unlike aging, is reversible, but only if you know exactly what to restore and how to restore it safely. And why starting too late is not nearly as dangerous as never starting at all. Because once you understand which movements kept these people strong, and why those movements speak directly to the nervous system, the joints, and the deepest stabilizing muscles, you begin to realize that the problem was never your age. It was the environment your body was adapting to. And the moment you change that environment, even slightly, even gently, the body listens. What it listens for first is not intensity. It listens for familiarity, movements. It recognizes from a time when strength was not something you trained, but something you lived. And when those movements return, something else returns. With them, a sense of grounding, a sense of control, a quiet confidence that does not need to be proven. But the most important part of this story has not been told yet, because not all movements rebuild strength. Some actually accelerate decline when done wrong. And the difference between the two is subtle enough that many people unknowingly choose the wrong path, believing they are helping themselves, when in reality, they are teaching their body to protect itself by becoming weaker. The cultures that preserved leg strength understood this difference instinctively. They chose positions and movements that strengthened without shock, challenged without damage, and trained the mind to stay calm inside discomfort instead of avoiding it. And once you see how those choices were made, once you understand why they work even when everything else fails, you begin to see your own daily movements differently. You notice the moments where strength could be built instead of lost. You notice how often your body is asking for a challenge that never comes. And you begin to realize that the solution was never hidden in a gym, a machine, or a pill. It was hidden in plain sight, inside movements so old, so natural, that modern life simply forgot them. Right before the moment when everything starts to give way, right before the legs begin to hesitate, right before the body quietly decides whether it will keep supporting you, or slowly, carefully, begin to let go of what it no longer believes. You need, starting with the strength that once carried you everywhere, and ending with the confidence to trust your own body when it matters most. Because the next step in this story begins exactly where that hesitation starts, and what happens next depends entirely on whether you understand why the body reacts the way it does when faced with the choice between safety and strength, between comfort and capability, between remaining upright or slowly silently surrendering ground, and once that choice is made, the consequences ripple forward in ways that most people never see coming until the moment they try to stand, and their legs decide whether they will obey or hesitate again. That hesitation is not weakness. It is a message. Your nervous system is conservative by design. When it senses instability, it does not ask for bravery. It asks for caution, and caution, over time, feels exactly like aging. Inside the body, strength is never lost all at once. It is negotiated away. The brain constantly calculates risk. How much force can these joints tolerate? How quickly can these muscles react? How stable is the ground beneath us? When those answers become uncertain, the brain makes a decision that feels protective in the moment, but costly in the long run. It reduces output, less power through the legs, slower reactions, shorter steps. Not because the muscles vanished, but because the system stopped trusting them. This is why so many people are shocked when they hear scans and tests that show their muscles are still there, yet they feel weak. The problem is not absence. It is access. Strength that the brain does not trust is strength it will not fully use. And here is where the story deepens. In most modern environments, the body is trained to avoid instability. Flat floors, soft seating, handrails everywhere, shoes that absorb feedback. All of it removes small challenges that used to keep the system sharp. Those challenges were never dramatic. They were subtle, almost boring. Balancing while waiting, lowering the body close to the ground, rising without assistance, feeling the foot roll through every step. These actions constantly reassured the nervous system. We've got this. Remove them, and the reassurance disappears. The brain responds logically. It tightens control. It limits range. It favors safety over strength. This is why people can walk confidently on familiar ground, yet freeze on uneven surfaces. Why they feel fine indoors, but tense outdoors. Why a single stumble can change behavior for years. The fear does not come from the fall. It comes from the loss of trust that followed. But something fascinating happens when that trust is slowly restored. The nervous system does not need force to change its mind. It needs evidence. Evidence delivered in a language it understands. That language is repetition, control, and absence of threat. High-impact movements shout at the system. Slow, grounded movements whisper. The cultures that preserved leg strength chose to whisper. They never tried to overpower the body. They invited it to participate. They used positions that loaded muscles without jerking joints. They favored time under tension instead of explosive effort. They trained balance not as a performance, but as a daily conversation with gravity. Over weeks, the brain noticed something. Nothing bad was happening. No pain signals. No instability spirals. No emergency responses. So it allowed a little more strength. Then a little more range. Then a little more speed. This is how capacity returns. Not as a sudden breakthrough, but as permission. And permission is everything. Because when the brain gives permission, the muscles respond quickly, faster than most people expect. Faster than age-based assumptions allow. Researchers observed this repeatedly. Older adults who had avoided certain positions for years began using them again. At first awkwardly, then cautiously, then naturally. What surprised the scientists was not the physical change, it was the psychological shift. Participants reported feeling taller, more grounded, less anxious about movement. Their bodies had not just become stronger. They had become quieter. Less internal alarm. This calm is not a side effect. It is the signal that the system is reorganizing itself. And this is where modern advice often goes wrong. It focuses on muscles as if they operate alone, as if adding resistance automatically restores function. But the body is not a machine with replaceable parts. It is a negotiation between systems. If the nervous system is not convinced, Strength gains remain theoretical. This explains why so many people exercise faithfully, yet still fear stairs. Why they train legs in controlled environments, but struggle in real life. The missing piece is specificity. The body must be challenged in ways that resemble life. Not sport. Not competition. Life. Standing, lowering, balancing, holding. When these elements are reintroduced correctly, something remarkable occurs. The smallest muscles wake up first, the ones around the ankle that adjust millimeters at a time. The deep hip stabilizers that prevent collapse. The intrinsic foot muscles that sense the ground before the brain consciously registers it. These muscles do not respond well to machines. They respond to responsibility. Give them responsibility, and they remember who they are. This is why some cultures never lost them. They never outsourced responsibility away from the body. Chairs replaced squatting. Cars replaced walking. Shoes replaced sensation. Each substitution seemed harmless. Together, they rewrote the body's job description. By midlife, many people are no longer required to support themselves fully. So the body stops offering that support. Not out of failure, out of efficiency. Reverse the requirement, and efficiency works in your favor. This is where hope quietly enters the picture, because rebuilding trust does not require youth. It requires consistency. The nervous system cares far more about today than about your past. It asks one question repeatedly. Did this feel safe? Answer yes often enough, and it recalibrates. Answer no even occasionally, and it tightens again. This is why progress must feel controlled, not heroic. The goal is not to impress the body. It is to reassure it, and reassurance comes from positions that are stable, slow, and repeatable. Positions that load the legs without threatening the joints. Movements that challenge balance without risking collapse. Over time, these signals accumulate. The brain begins to allow more force, more speed, more confidence. And with that confidence comes freedom. Freedom to move without planning every step. Freedom to react instead of freeze. Freedom to trust that your legs will do what they were designed to do. But not all movements send the right message. Some popular exercises actually teach the nervous system to stay guarded. They introduce instability before stability, intensity before control. For younger bodies, this may be tolerable. For aging systems, it can backfire. The cultures that maintained leg strength intuitively avoided this trap. They prioritized postures that kept the center of gravity low. They allowed the feet full contact with the ground. They used walls, rails, and surfaces not as crutches, but as temporary partners. Support was not weakness. It was strategy. And strategy made the difference between building trust and reinforcing fear. Once you understand this, the path forward becomes clearer. You stop asking how hard you should push. You start asking how well your body understands what you are asking it to do. You begin to see that strength is not about domination. It is about cooperation. And cooperation changes everything. Because when the body feels included in the process, it adapts generously. What comes next is not a list of exercises. It is a shift in how movement is used as communication. A way of speaking directly to the systems that decide whether your legs feel dependable or uncertain. The next phase of this story reveals exactly how that communication works in daily life. How ordinary moments can become powerful signals of safety and strength, and how people who once feared movement began to look forward to it again, not because they were chasing fitness, but because their bodies finally stopped arguing with them. And once that argument ends, something else begins. Something that feels less like training and more like remembering how to inhabit your own body. Starting with the simplest actions that quietly reshape the future of your mobility, your independence, and the ease with which you move through the world every single day. The shift rarely announces itself with excitement. It arrives as relief. Relief when you stand and your legs respond without negotiation. Relief when you catch yourself mid-step and recover without panic. Relief when movement stops feeling like something to manage. This is where daily life becomes the laboratory, because the most powerful signals you can send to the body do not come from scheduled workouts. They come from repetition woven into ordinary moments. The nervous system does not care whether something is called exercise. It cares whether the demand is clear and consistent. Lowering yourself closer to the ground tells the hips they are still responsible. Holding a position tells the thighs they are still needed. Balancing quietly tells the ankles they still matter. These signals rebuild a map inside the brain, a map that says, this territory is safe. And once that map is redrawn, strength stops feeling fragile. One of the first changes people notice is not physical. It is behavioral. They stop rushing. Rushing is often fear disguised as efficiency. When the body does not trust itself, it hurries through movement to get it over with. As trust returns, speed becomes optional. Slower movements suddenly feel powerful. Instead of weak. This matters more than most realize. Slow, controlled positions keep muscles engaged without provoking alarm. They increase circulation without impact. They load joints in ways that nourish cartilage instead of grinding it. Time replaces force. This is especially important later in life, when recovery matters as much as challenge. The body adapts best when it feels invited, not ambushed, and this invitation does not require special conditions. It happens while brushing teeth, while waiting for water to boil, while standing in line. Moments where the body is already upright become opportunities to remind it how to stay that way. Standing on one leg, even briefly, reactivates entire chains of stabilizers. Not dramatically, quietly. The brain notices the demand and sends resources. At first, the signal feels shaky, then curious, then confident. This is how balance improves, not through heroic effort, but through frequent conversation. The same applies to lowering the body. When chairs replace the ground, the hips forget how to guide descent. The knees forget how to share load. The ankles forget how to adjust. Reintroducing lower positions restores these relationships, not by forcing depth, but by respecting range. Support is used, not avoided. Hands touch surfaces. Walls become partners. The body learns that closeness to the ground is not a threat, and that lesson stays. People often report that getting up from the floor no longer feels like a problem to solve. It feels like a movement again. This is not nostalgia. It is neurology. The brain recognizes patterns it learned early in life. When those patterns reappear, even decades later, it responds quickly. Another change emerges quietly. Circulation improves. The legs begin to feel warmer. Heaviness decreases. Swelling reduces. This is not cosmetic. Strong, active muscles act like pumps. They assist blood return. They reduce stagnation. In cultures where these movements never disappeared, leg circulation remained robust far longer. This is one reason long walks remain comfortable well into old age. The feet play a role here that modern life often ignores. Shoes that isolate sensation may feel comfortable, but they silence feedback. The nervous system depends on information from the soles of the feet to regulate balance. When that information returns, even partially, stability improves. This does not require abandoning modern footwear. It requires moments of awareness. Rolling through the foot instead of slapping it down. Feeling weight shift from heel to toe. Allowing the toes to participate. These sensations recalibrate posture. Posture, in turn, redistributes load. Load redistribution reduces joint stress. This cascade is subtle, but powerful. Another unexpected effect appears in the mind. As the body becomes more reliable, anxiety decreases. Not generalized anxiety. Movement anxiety. The background tension that accompanies stairs, crowds, uneven ground. When the body proves itself repeatedly, the mind relaxes. This relaxation improves reaction time. Tension slows response. Calm speeds it up. This is why people who feel relaxed in their bodies often recover from slips more easily than those who are strong but tense. Strength. Without calm is brittle. Calm without strength is vulnerable. Together, they create resilience. The cultures that preserved these principles never separated physical and mental training. Holding uncomfortable positions calmly was considered valuable, not because discomfort was celebrated, but because calm within discomfort. Translated to life, this philosophy turns out to have physiological effects. Slow breathing during effort signals safety to the nervous system. Safety allows adaptation. Holding breath signals threat. Threat halts progress. This is why breathing becomes central. Not dramatic breathing. Natural, continuous breathing. The kind that says, "We are okay here." Over time, the body associates effort with safety instead of alarm. This association is the gateway to lasting change. As weeks pass, something else becomes noticeable. Movements feel smoother. Transitions between sitting and standing lose their edges. Turning feels coordinated instead of segmented. This smoothness is a sign that muscle groups are working together. Again, coordination is often lost before strength. Regaining it restores efficiency. Efficiency reduces fatigue. Fatigue is one of the hidden drivers of decline. When movement tires you quickly, you do less of it. Doing less accelerates loss. Breaking this cycle requires making movement feel economical again. Small improvements compound. A few seconds longer in a position. A slightly lower descent. A steadier balance. None of these feel dramatic. Together, they rewrite capacity. Importantly, pain is not the guide here. Discomfort is expected. Pain is not. Discomfort feels like effort. Pain feels like warning. Learning to distinguish the two is critical. The body adapts to effort. It resists warning. The goal is to flirt with effort, not provoke alarm. This distinction protects joints while strengthening muscles. It allows progress without backlash. People who follow this approach often report something surprising. They begin to enjoy the sensation of effort, not because it hurts, but because it feels purposeful. The body feels engaged. Engagement is the opposite of decline. Decline feels passive. Engagement feels alive. This is where imagination comes into play. People begin to picture future moments differently. Climbing stairs without hesitation. Traveling without fear of uneven ground. Playing with grandchildren without calculating exits. These images matter. The brain responds to expectation. When it anticipates capability, it allows preparation. Preparation strengthens response. This is not positive thinking. It is neurological priming. The body prepares for what it expects to do. When expectation shifts from avoidance to participation, adaptation follows. None of this requires perfection. Consistency matters more. Missing days does not erase progress. Returning gently restores it. The nervous system values pattern, not punishment. As this pattern settles, people often realize something profound. They are no longer training for youth. They are training for continuity. Continuity of movement. Continuity of independence. Continuity of self-trust. This reframing removes pressure. There's no finish line. There is no comparison. There's only the ongoing conversation between body and gravity. And that conversation can be healthy at any age. Next phase brings this all together. How these principles translate into a way of living that supports strength without obsession. How simple daily rituals become anchors of mobility. How the fear that once hovered around movement dissolves into quiet confidence. And finally, how recognizing the true role of the legs changes how people think about aging itself, not as a narrowing of possibility, but as a shift toward efficiency, wisdom, and grounded power, because the legs were never meant to be decorative. They were meant to carry life forward, and when they are reminded of that purpose, they respond patiently, faithfully, waiting only for the signal that it is safe to do so, a signal that once understood, changes everything about how the future feels when you stand, when you step, and when you trust that your body will meet you there, ready, steady, and capable, exactly when you need it most. By the time people reach this point in the journey, something important has already shifted. Not just in the body, but in identity. They no longer think of themselves as someone who is trying to stay strong. They begin to feel like someone who is simply capable again. That distinction matters, because the body responds differently when strength is treated as a temporary project versus a permanent state of being. When movement becomes routine instead of effortful, the nervous system settles into it. It stops asking whether this is safe. It assumes it is. This assumption frees energy. Energy that used to be spent on caution gets redirected toward reaction, balance, and flow. This is why people who regain leg strength often describe feeling lighter, even without weight loss. The body is no longer bracing against itself. The legs stop being something you manage. They become something you trust. At this stage, many people look back and realize how early the warning signs appeared. The first time stairs felt longer. The first time getting up required planning. The first time balance felt negotiable. None of those moments felt dramatic. That is why they were ignored, but what they represented was not damage. It was disengagement, and disengagement, once recognized, can be reversed. What emerges next is resilience, not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that shows up when you step on uneven ground and your body adjusts without conscious thought. When you stumble and recover before fear even registers. When fatigue does not dictate your choices, this resilience is built from thousands of small signals sent to the body over time. Signals that say, we still do this. We still lower. We still balance. We still hold. These signals accumulate into a baseline of competence. And competence is the foundation of independence. This is why leg strength is not about aesthetics. It is about agency. It determines whether you move through the world on your terms or negotiate with it at every step. Cultures that preserved this understanding never framed aging as inevitable decline. They framed it as refinement, less excess, more precision. The movements they valued were not about intensity. They were about efficiency, doing more with less effort, staying grounded instead of aggressive. This mindset protected joints while strengthening muscles. It preserved mobility without chasing extremes. Modern science is now catching up to what tradition understood intuitively. Low impact, high control movements stimulate muscle fibers that are most resistant to aging. They improve neuromuscular coordination. They enhance proprioception. These effects compound. And unlike short-term fitness gains, they do not vanish when routines are interrupted. Once the nervous system relearns trust, it holds onto it. This is why even brief, consistent practices have outsized impact. A few minutes daily, spread across normal life, outperform long, infrequent sessions. The body prefers reminders to assaults. As this understanding settles in, fear loses its grip. Fear of falling. Fear of getting weaker. Fear of becoming dependent. Fear thrives on uncertainty. Certainty returns when the body proves itself again and again. This proof does not come from promises. It comes from experience, standing steadily, lowering smoothly, rising without hesitation. Each repetition reinforces the same message: we are still capable. And capability reshapes the future. People who regain confidence in their legs plan differently. They travel more. They engage more. They withdraw less. Social isolation decreases. Mood improves. Cognitive health benefits indirectly. Movement is not just physical input. It is sensory nourishment for the brain. When the body moves confidently, the brain stays sharp. This connection is often overlooked, but it explains why mobility and longevity track so closely together, not because movement adds years, But because it adds life to those years, the final realization many people arrive at is simple, but profound. Strength was never lost. It was misplaced, buried under habits that no longer required it. Once those habits change, strength resurfaces patiently, reliably. The body does not resent neglect. It responds to opportunity. Offer it the chance to participate again. And it does. At any age. This is not about reclaiming youth. It is about reclaiming authorship over your own movement, the ability to decide where you go, how you get there, and how confidently you arrive. Legs carry more than weight. They carry freedom. And freedom, once felt again, becomes non-negotiable. So, the question is no longer whether decline is coming. The question is whether you will interrupt it early enough to change its direction. Because the moment you restore trust between your brain and your body, the future stops feeling smaller. It feels open. Steady. Yours.